Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The following content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or psychological professional advice. The anthropology of digital education and the legal landscape of the United States are complex and ever-changing fields. Viewers should conduct their own due diligence and consult with qualified professionals, such as licensed attorneys or certified financial planners, regarding their specific personal circumstances. This video explores social trends and historical data and should not be used as a substitute for professional counsel. In the United States, we are currently witnessing a silent but massive migration of human knowledge. For decades, the wisdom of how to navigate the end of a marriage was passed down through hushed whispers in smoke-filled rooms, through the advice of village elders, or behind the expensive closed doors of high-priced law firms. But today, that entire anthropological process has been disrupted. We have moved from the kitchen table to the digital classroom. This is the era of the divorce university. It is a world where thousands of Americans are opting out of traditional legal gatekeeping and instead enrolling in online masterclasses to learn the art and science of uncoupling. This shift represents one of the most significant changes in American kinship structures since the introduction of no-fault divorce legislation. We are seeing a fundamental move away from represented citizens to educated participants. This is not just a trend in education. It is a total restructuring of how humans share survival data during their most vulnerable moments. If you have ever wondered why the traditional legal system feels like it is failing the modern family, or how digital communities are replacing the biological village, you need to understand the mechanics of these online institutions. The problem facing the modern American is no longer a lack of information, but the lack of a structured narrative to survive a systemic collapse of the household. Traditionally, anthropologists view divorce through the lens of a rite of passage. According to the framework established by Arnold van Gennep, every major life transition involves a period of liminality, a state of being betwixt and between social roles. In the past, the community helped the individual navigate this liminal space. However, in our hyper-individualized, digital-first society, that communal support has eroded. The divorce university has emerged to fill this void, acting as a digital shaman that guides the individual through the legal, financial, and emotional wilderness. Today, we are going to explore the deep-seated cultural shifts that made these platforms inevitable, the historical trends that led us here, and the potential outcomes for a society that treats legal trauma as a curriculum to be mastered. To understand the anthropology of sharing knowledge via an online divorce university, we must first look at the historical evolution of how Americans have accessed legal and social information. Prior to the mid-20th century, divorce was a rare and deeply stigmatized event. Knowledge about the process was intentionally suppressed to maintain social cohesion. If a marriage failed, the individuals involved were often left in an information vacuum. Case studies from the early 1900s show that women, in particular, were often completely unaware of their rights or the procedural steps required to secure their future. Information was a form of power held exclusively by the patriarchal legal establishment. The first major shift occurred in 1969 with the California Family Law Act, signed by then-Governor Ronald Reagan. This ushered in the era of no-fault divorce, which fundamentally changed the demand for information. Suddenly, the legal barrier was lowered, but the complexity of the new family unit increased. As divorce rates rose throughout the 1970s and 80s, we saw the rise of the self-help movement. This was the precursor to the divorce university. Books like Creative Divorce and various procedural manuals began to circulate, representing the first time that insider legal knowledge was democratized for the masses. This was an anthropological milestone, the transition from oral, secretive knowledge to codified, accessible text. Fast forward to the 2020s, and we have entered the digital institutionalization phase. An online divorce university is not just a collection of articles. It is a structured, pedagogical environment. It utilizes the same psychological triggers as elite academic institutions: syllabi, modules, community forums, and graduation milestones. From an anthropological perspective, this is a form of social reaggregation. The individual is no longer just a divorced person. They are a student of the process. This shift in identity is crucial. It moves the participant from a passive victim of a legal system to an active learner. Consider the step-by-step evolution of a typical student in these online ecosystems. Step 1 is often the information audit. In this phase, the digital platform provides tools for the user to map out their social and financial capital. Anthropologists call this mapping the kinship network. In a traditional setting, this was done by the family lawyer over several months at an hourly rate. In the divorce university model, it is done via a modular dashboard in 48 hours. This efficiency changes the power dynamic between the citizen and the state. By the time the individual interacts with a judge or an attorney, they have already been acculturated into the language of the law. They are no longer outsiders, they are informed actors. The sharing of knowledge within these online universities also follows a unique, horizontal peer-to-peer model. Unlike a traditional university where a professor holds all the authority, these platforms often feature robust community forums where historical trends are analyzed in real time by thousands of participants. A user in Florida can share a specific case study about a mediation tactic that worked for them, which is then analyzed and adapted by a user in Washington. This is technological tribalism at its finest. It is the creation of a collective intelligence that bypasses traditional institutional boundaries. However, we must also look at the potential outcomes of this democratization. While access to information is generally positive, the anthropology of expert systems suggests that when we move knowledge from professionals to the public, we often see a standardization of trauma. Because these online universities must create content that appeals to a broad audience, they often focus on the average experience. This can lead to a phenomenon where individuals try to fit their unique, complex human relationships into a pre-made digital template. We see this in the rise of formulaic settlement discussions in online forums, where users begin to value the standard outcome over a personalized one. Furthermore, we have to examine the economics of empathy within these platforms. These universities are businesses. They commodify the transitionary period of a human life. In an anthropological sense, they are selling certainty in an inherently uncertain environment. By providing a structured curriculum, they reduce the cognitive load of the divorce process. For the American consumer, who is already overwhelmed by the demands of a high-speed digital economy, the appeal of a step-by-step guide is irresistible. It promises a sense of order in a world that feels increasingly chaotic. As we dive deeper into this masterclass, we will look at specific case studies of how these platforms have influenced the outcomes of high-conflict domestic cases. We will analyze the data on pro se, self-represented litigants and how their success rates have shifted as these online educational tools have become more sophisticated. We will also explore the digital divide. Who has access to these universities? Who is left behind in the old, expensive, and opaque system? The anthropology of sharing knowledge is not just about the what, it is about the how and the why. Why did we choose to build universities for divorce instead of fixing the legal system itself? How does the language used in these courses, terms like co-parenting strategy or asset optimization, change the way we view our former partners? We are moving into a future where every major life crisis will have its own dedicated university. To understand the divorce university is to understand the future of how humans will survive, adapt, and rebuild in the 21st century. This is the first step in decoding the new social contract of the United States. To understand the sheer scale of this transformation, we have to look at the profile of a typical user in the current landscape of 2026. We are no longer looking at simple informational websites or static blog posts from legal firms. We are looking at comprehensive, multi-layered educational ecosystems that have fundamentally re-architected how the American public interacts with the concept of family law. Imagine a citizen named Alex, living in a suburban pocket of Columbus, Ohio. Alex is not a legal expert. Alex is a mid-level project manager in the tech sector. When the decision to separate is made in 2026, the first instinct for someone in Alex's demographic is no longer to pick up a heavy phone book or even to perform a generic search for a local attorney. Instead, Alex logs into a platform that looks strikingly similar to a modern Ivy League learning management system. This is the first touchpoint of the divorce university, and it represents a massive anthropological shift from seeking representation to seeking competency. In this digital environment, the user is greeted not by a retainer agreement, but by a syllabus. Historically, the transmission of survival knowledge during a domestic collapse happened through localized observation and oral tradition. You watched your neighbor navigate a crisis, or you listened to a relative who had been through the system a decade prior. However, historical trends show that this word-of-mouth system was often riddled with inaccuracies and outdated legal myths. In 2026, this proximity-based learning has been replaced by algorithmic curation. The divorce university uses behavioral data match Alex with specific modules designed for middle management professionals with joint custody concerns and shared retirement assets. This is the move toward hyper-specialized tribal knowledge. It is no longer about a general understanding of the law. It is about the specific survival data required for Alex's exact socioeconomic bracket. Let's look at a case study involving a user named Marcus in Phoenix, Arizona. Marcus is navigating a high-conflict separation where communication with his spouse has completely broken down. In a previous era, say 1996, Marcus would have spent $10,000 in the first month just on discovery and a barrage of angry emails exchanged between paralegals at $500 an hour. In 2026, Marcus enrolls in the High Conflict Communication Masterclass within a digital university. Here, he learns the linguistic anthropology of de-escalation. He isn't just getting advice. He is being trained in a specific dialect. The platform uses AI-driven simulations to let Marcus practice responding to inflammatory text messages in real time. This is a step-by-step educational intervention where the student learns to strip emotion from their syntax, moving from a reactive stance to a transactional one. The historical trend we are observing here is the movement from legal advocacy, where someone speaks for you, to behavioral modification, where you are taught to speak for yourself in a way the court respects. The structure of these platforms follows a very specific pedagogical path that mirrors a 4-year degree, but condensed into weeks. Step 1 is the comprehensive asset audit. In this module, the student is taught the forensic anthropology of their own household. Imagine if you were asked to catalog every item, every debt, and every potential tax implication of your life over the last decade. For most Americans, this is an overwhelming task that leads to paralysis. The Divorce University breaks this down into microtasks. The potential outcomes of this approach are significant. By the time Marcus or Alex finishes this module, they possess a level of financial literacy that often exceeds what they had during the marriage itself. They are learning the anthropology of value, how a society, and specifically the U.S. legal system, quantifies a life lived together. The second pillar of this curriculum is parental coordination and the anthropology of kinship. In the United States, the traditional view of the nuclear family has undergone radical changes. The Divorce University acts as a cultural bridge, teaching students how to transition from a single household unit to a dual household network. This involves deep dives into case studies of successful co-parenting structures. Students examine the data on childhood development and are taught to draft parenting plans that are not just legal documents, but operational manuals for their new reality. This is where the sharing of knowledge becomes most vital. Within the university's community forums, a user like Elena in Miami might post a redacted version of her mediation agreement regarding holiday scheduling. Within hours, 30 other students who have navigated the same Florida circuit court provide feedback based on their own field work. This is the crowdsourcing of legal strategy. It bypasses the traditional hierarchy where the professional is the sole source of truth. From an anthropological perspective, we must examine why this model has become the dominant way to share knowledge in 2026. The primary driver is the economics of agency. The average litigated divorce in the United States can easily exceed $20,000 in professional fees. Conversely, a comprehensive divorce university might cost a flat fee of $500 to $1,000. This is a massive redistribution of wealth. The capital that used to flow into the legal industry is now staying within the post-divorce households of the American middle class. We are witnessing a knowledge-based asset retention strategy. When people are educated, they are less likely to engage in the high-cost, low-yield emotional warfare that fuels the traditional legal machine. Furthermore, we have to consider the gamification of grit. How do these platforms keep people engaged when they are experiencing profound grief and stress? They use the psychology of progression. Users earn digital markers or certificates for completing modules on complex topics like qualified domestic relations orders or the nuances of state-specific community property laws. It might seem trivial, but this provides a sense of agency and achievement in a period where the individual often feels they have lost all control. In a traditional divorce, the participant is a spectator to their own life, watching lawyers and judges make decisions. In the university model, they are the protagonist of their own education. They are leveling up their knowledge to meet the challenge. Imagine if the entire U.S. legal system adopted this educational model. Instead of a summons, you received a login. Instead of a hearing, you attended a seminar. While we have not reached that point of systemic integration yet, the Divorce University is the private sector shadow of what a future judicial system might look like. It is a proto-institution that operates on the belief that most domestic conflicts are not legal problems, but education problems. If both parties are operating from the same set of facts and the same educational background, the potential outcomes for a peaceful resolution increase dramatically. This brings us to the concept of the invisible village. In the past, the village held the knowledge of how to mend or end a relationship. As Americans became more mobile and less connected to their physical communities, that village disappeared. The online university has reconstructed that village in a digital space. But this new village is different. It is not bound by the biases of a local small town. It is a meritocracy of information. The knowledge shared is tested against the harsh reality of various state courts across the country. A strategy that fails in a court in Texas is analyzed, deconstructed, and the curriculum is updated in real time. This is a living, breathing body of knowledge that evolves faster than any law school textbook ever could. As we look at the historical trends from 2020 to 2026, the data suggests a distinct correlation between the rise of online divorce education and the decline in courtroom hours per filing. People are spending more time in the digital classroom and less time in the gallery. This represents a monumental shift in human resource allocation. However, this transition is not without its complexities. As this knowledge becomes more accessible, the very nature of the legal profession is being forced to change. Attorneys are finding themselves no longer as the gatekeepers of information, but as the consultants for highly educated clients. But what happens when the education becomes too effective? What happens when these digital universities begin to influence the law itself? We are starting to see a phenomenon where the collective data from thousands of students is being used to lobby for legislative changes in various U.S. states. The students are becoming the teachers, and the classroom is becoming a political force. If thousands of people in a divorce university agree that a certain tax statute is archaic and damaging to the modern family, they have the collective organizational power to demand change. This is the ultimate stage of knowledge sharing, where the education of the individual leads to the evolution of the society. How exactly are these platforms using advanced behavioral analytics to predict which students will succeed and which will fail? And why are some state bar associations attempting to categorize these educational tools as the unauthorized practice of law? The battle for the future of American domestic knowledge is just beginning. In the next part, we will go inside the architecture of the digital courtroom and explore the secret algorithms that are now determining the fate of the American family. To truly understand the architecture of the digital courtroom in 2026, we have to look at the transition from physical geography to digital topography. Historically, the American legal system was built on the concept of the circuit, a physical area where a judge traveled to hear cases. In the modern era, that circuit has been replaced by the server. The divorce university doesn't just teach you the law, it teaches you the code that now governs the law. In many U.S. jurisdictions today, the initial phase of a filing is no longer reviewed by a human clerk, but by a natural language processing algorithm designed to flag inconsistencies in financial disclosures or parenting plans. The sharing of knowledge in an online university has evolved to meet this technological gatekeeper head-on. Consider a case study involving a user named Sarah in Austin, Texas. Sarah is navigating a divorce where the primary assets are not physical property, but digital ones: cryptocurrency holdings, intellectual property from a side hustle, and a complex portfolio of fractionalized real estate. In 2020, Sarah would have struggled to find an attorney who truly understood the intersection of family law and blockchain. In 2026, Sarah logs into the Advanced Digital Asset Liquidation module of her online university. Here, the knowledge sharing is focused on the forensic anthropology of a digital life. Sarah isn't just looking at spreadsheets. She is using an integrated tool that scans public ledgers and cross-references them with historical trends in Texas court rulings regarding non-custodial digital assets. This is where the secret algorithms come into play. These universities utilize what is known as predictive litigation modeling. Imagine if you could input every detail of your marriage, the length, the combined income, the zip code, and the specific temperament of the judge assigned to your case, and receive a data-backed projection of the most likely outcome. This is not a guess. It is an analysis of tens of thousands of previous case studies within that specific jurisdiction. For Sarah, the university's algorithm identifies that Judge Miller in Travis County has a historical trend of favoring a 55-45 split in cases where one spouse was the primary caregiver during the acquisition of digital assets. This information is a paradigm shift. It moves the sharing of knowledge from the theoretical to the tactical. Sarah's step-by-step journey through this predictive module looks like this. Step 1. Data aggregation. She connects her financial APIs to the university's secure vault. Step 2. Scenario simulation. The algorithm runs 300 different versions of her settlement negotiation, identifying the breaking point for her spouse based on their own known financial constraints and psychological profiles. Step 3. Document optimization. The university's AI helps Sarah draft a settlement proposal that uses the specific linguistic triggers known to be favored by Judge Miller's previous rulings. Anthropologically, this is the gamification of justice. We are no longer asking what is fair. We are asking what the data suggests is the most probable path to a resolution. This leads us to the concept of algorithmic arbitrage. In the anthropology of knowledge, arbitrage is the practice of taking advantage of a price difference between two or more markets. In the context of a divorce university, students are practicing a form of informational arbitrage. They are taking the high-level, data-driven insights usually reserved for elite, $500 an hour legal consultants and applying them to their own pro se cases. The potential outcomes of this are profound. We are seeing a stabilization of settlements. When both sides have access to the same predictive data, the incentive to fight for an outlier result diminishes. The data acts as a cooling agent on the heat of domestic conflict. Imagine if every citizen had access to a personal AI that understood the legal history of their entire state. That is the reality within these digital institutions in 2026. However, this creates a new kind of social stratification. There is now a divide between the data-informed and the digitally disenfranchised. If you are not enrolled in a divorce university, you are effectively bringing a knife to a drone fight. You are relying on human intuition and the potentially biased advice of a single professional, while your opponent is backed by the collective intelligence of 1,000 successful case studies. The sharing of knowledge also extends to the soft sciences of the digital courtroom. One of the most popular modules in 2026 is the Virtual Hearing Performance Masterclass. As more U.S. courts move to permanent remote hearings for family law matters, the anthropology of the courtroom has changed. The university teaches students the ergonomics of a Zoom hearing, everything from the background choice to the specific micro-expressions that an AI-driven liar detection or credibility assessment tool might flag. This is high-stakes performance art backed by behavioral science. Students are taught to modulate their tone of voice to match the frequency that the court's transcription software finds most authoritative. Let's look at a step-by-step breakdown of how a student prepares for a virtual mediation via the university's simulation lab. First, the student uploads a 3-minute video of themselves speaking. The university's AI analyzes their speech patterns, identifying hedging language or markers of uncertainty that could be exploited by an opposing counsel. Second, the student enters a VR environment that mimics the specific interface used by the state's judicial system. Here, they practice answering questions from a digital avatar of a mediator. The goal is to reach a state of procedural fluency. By the time the actual hearing occurs, the student has experienced it 50 times in a controlled educational environment. The historical trend we are seeing here is the demystification of the gavel. For centuries, the law was shrouded in ritual and specialized language designed to keep the layperson in a state of dependency. The divorce university strips away the robes and the Latin. It treats the legal process as a series of manageable, data-driven tasks. This is the anthropology of empowerment through transparency. But it raises a critical question. If the law becomes a predictable algorithm, what happens to the human element of mercy and nuance? The data from 2026 suggests that while efficiency is up, there is a growing concern about the mechanical settlement. This is where the university's modules are so effective at predicting the average outcome that individuals stop fighting for unique arrangements that might actually serve their families better in the long run. They accept the algorithm's choice because it is the path of least resistance. We are trading the messy human complexity of the traditional courtroom for the clean, cold efficiency of the digital dashboard. As these universities grow in power, they are also becoming massive repositories of private data. This is the shadow archive of the American family. Every interaction, every settlement negotiation, and every psychological assessment is being used to further refine the algorithms. This creates a feedback loop where the university isn't just reflecting the law, it is beginning to shape it. When a university can show a state legislature data from 50,000 cases that a specific child support formula is failing in 80% of scenarios, the pressure to change that law becomes irresistible. But what happens when the algorithms are used against the students? Who owns the data that Sarah and Marcus have uploaded to these platforms? And as we move into the middle chapters of this masterclass, we have to confront a darker possibility. Are these universities truly democratizing knowledge? Or are they creating a new kind of digital surveillance state within the family unit? In the next part, we are going to look at the psychological engineering modules, how these platforms are being used to reprogram the emotional responses of parents and the controversial co-parenting AI that is now making daily decisions for millions of American children. The line between education and control is about to disappear. In the landscape of 2026, the divorce university has moved beyond the ledger and into the limbic system. To understand the anthropology of knowledge sharing in this space, we must examine the rise of psychological engineering. We are no longer talking about simple advice on how to stay calm during a deposition. We are looking at the systematic application of effective computing to reprogram the emotional responses of the American family. In this era, the digital university acts as a surrogate prefrontal cortex for individuals whose biological capacity for rational decision-making has been compromised by the trauma of separation. Imagine a case study involving a couple named David and Chloe living in the high-pressure environment of Northern Virginia. David is a government contractor. Chloe is a senior marketing executive. Their marriage has ended, and the level of toxicity in their communication is at a critical state. In 2020, this couple would have spent 18 months in high-conflict litigation, fueled by a series of reactive late-night emails that each cost them hundreds of dollars in legal review. In 2026, David and Chloe are enrolled in the university's behavioral synchrony program. This is a mandatory prerequisite for their mediated settlement. The university utilizes a tool called the communication buffer and tone mapper. This is the first step in the behavioral reprogramming process. When David sits down at 11 p.m. to draft a message to Chloe about their daughter Maya's school tuition, the university's AI interface intervenes in real time. This is a step-by-step pedagogical intervention. First, as David types, the AI performs a sentiment analysis. It flags words like always, irresponsible, or your fault. Second, it presents David with the toxicity heat map of his own message, showing him exactly where his language will trigger a defensive response in Chloe, based on her known psychological profile. Third, it refuses to send the message until David adjusts the linguistic markers to meet the neutral narrative standard taught in Module 4. From an anthropological perspective, this is the outsourcing of the superego. Traditionally, the social norms of the community, the village elders or the religious leaders, provided the friction necessary to prevent social escalation. In the atomized society of 2026, that friction is provided by a software algorithm. David is not learning to be a better person through moral reflection. He is being conditioned into better behavior through a digital feedback loop. The potential outcomes of this are statistically significant. Historical trends from 2024 to 2026 show that couples using these tone mapping tools experience a 55% reduction in emergency legal filings related to harassment or domestic disturbance. However, we must look deeper at the co-parenting AI that is now an integral part of the divorce university curriculum. This is the digital arbiter model. Imagine if every daily decision, what time to pick up the kids, which extracurricular activity to prioritize, how to handle a misnap, was no longer a point of negotiation between parents, but a data-driven recommendation from an AI. Chloe and David have integrated their university dashboard with their daughter's school records, health apps, and their own professional calendars. When a conflict arises, for example, David's work schedule changes and he needs to swap a weekend, they don't speak to each other. They trigger the optimal logic gate. The AI analyzes Maya's current sleep data from her wearable device, suggesting she needs stability this weekend. The historical trend of David's previous swap requests, identifying a pattern of inconsistency. The proximity of both parents to the scheduled soccer tournament. The AI then outputs a decision recommendation. It states, based on the current educational and health priorities for Maya, the swap is not recommended. David, the university suggests you utilize the backup caregiver module to fulfill your professional obligation while maintaining Maya's routine. This is the anthropology of the invisible parent. The AI has become the third party in the marriage, a cold, rational, and data-backed authority that neither parent can easily argue with. Step by step, these platforms are teaching Americans to move from a relational model of family to a transactional one. The university provides a module called the Neutral Narrative Intensive. In this 10-day course, students are taught to strip all emotional terminology from their domestic life. Chloe is taught to stop referring to David as my ex, and instead use the term co-parenting financial partner. This is linguistic engineering designed to lower the stakes of every interaction. By changing the language, the university changes the perception of the reality. If you are interacting with a partner in a dissolved contract, you are less likely to experience the visceral fight or flight response associated with a betrayal by a spouse. Case studies of this effective displacement show that while it reduces conflict, it also creates a sense of emotional sterility. Some users report feeling like they are living in a simulation. They are following the university's scripts, using the university's AI, and following the university's schedule. They have successfully avoided the war of divorce, but they have also bypassed the grief of divorce. Anthropologists are concerned that this suppressed grief will manifest later in other areas of social life. We are essentially using technology to skip the painful parts of human evolution and transition. The data also reveals a shift in the geography of authority. In the past, the family court judge was the ultimate authority. In 2026, the dean of students at the online divorce university often holds more practical power over the daily lives of these families. The settlement agreements being drafted in these digital classrooms are so detailed and data-reliant that judges are increasingly simply rubber-stamping whatever the university algorithm produces. The knowledge sharing has become so sophisticated that the legal system is delegating its authority to the educational platform. Imagine if this model were applied to all of human conflict: a university for neighborhood disputes, or a university for workplace friction. The Divorce University is the pilot program for a new kind of governed society, where education is the primary tool of social control. This is the gamification of grit. Students like David earn civility points for every month they go without a flagged communication. These points can be used to unlock lower interest rates on post-divorce loans or reduced premiums on conflict insurance. A new financial product emerging in 2026 for high-net-worth individuals navigating separation. But as we look at the potential outcomes of this psychological engineering, we have to follow the money. While the AI is busy calming your temper, it is also performing a level of financial surveillance that would make the 20th century IRS envious. The university isn't just watching how you talk. It's watching how you spend, how you hide, and how you plan. The Financial Forensics module is where the true power of the 2026 Divorce University is hidden. How does the university's lifestyle audit algorithm catch a spouse who is hiding assets in a secret crypto wallet or an offshore digital corporation? And what happens when the parenting AI decides that your financial habits make you a suboptimal custodial choice? The transition from emotional reprogramming to financial warfare is seamless and invisible. In the next part, we are going into the digital vault, the forensic tools that are making it impossible to keep a secret in a modern American divorce. The hunt for the hidden economy of the household is about to begin. The hunt for the hidden economy of the household is about to begin. In the United States of 2026, the concept of a paper trail has been replaced by what anthropologists call digital exhaust. Every time an individual interacts with a smart device, completes a microtransaction in a virtual environment, or even adjusts their smart thermostat, they are leaving behind a trail of data that tells a story about their financial reality. The Divorce University has recognized that the biggest obstacle to a fair settlement in the modern era is not a lack of law, but a lack of visibility. To solve this, they have developed the Asset Discovery and Digital Forensic module, a sophisticated curriculum designed to turn any layperson into a forensic accountant of their own life. Imagine a case study involving a character named Jason, a software architect living in a high-rise in Chicago. Jason has spent the last 4 years of his marriage preparing for an eventual exit. He is not a criminal, but he is what we call a strategic separator. He has been diverting 5% of his earnings into a cold storage cryptocurrency wallet, purchasing fractionalized shares of digital art in the metaverse, and even maintaining a secret secondary e-commerce account where he sells high-end vintage watches. In 1996, Jason would have been untouchable. In 2026, his spouse, who we will call Emily, is enrolled in the university's Forensic Vault module. Step 1 of the university's process for Emily is the data integration phase. This is not about looking at bank statements. The university provides Emily with a secure API gateway that she can use to aggregate every digital touchpoint of their shared household. The curriculum teaches her how to perform a lifestyle discrepancy audit. This is a step-by-step process where the student compares the reported income of the household against the energy consumption and digital bandwidth usage of the home. The anthropology of the smart home is a key part of this deep dive. The university's data suggests a historical trend. Individuals hiding crypto mining operations or high-performance server rigs will show a specific, jagged pattern in their electricity bills that does not correlate with standard household appliances. By analyzing 3 years of utility data through the university's pattern recognizer tool, Emily identifies a consistent spike in energy usage during the hours Jason claimed to be at the gym. This is the first breadcrumb in the digital forest. The second step is the metadata harvest. The university teaches Emily how to analyze the metadata of shared family photos stored in the cloud. They show her how to look for GPS coordinates embedded in images of items Jason claimed he sold years ago, but was actually keeping in a climate-controlled storage unit 3 miles away. This is the anthropology of the object. In the digital age, objects never truly disappear. They just change coordinates. The curriculum provides a script for Emily to use when requesting the logs from the storage facility, citing specific U.S. privacy statutes she learned in Module 3. The third step involves the metaverse audit. In 2026, a significant portion of American household wealth is being migrated into virtual assets. The Divorce University has built a specialized tool that scans public blockchain ledgers for wallet addresses associated with Jason's known digital signatures. This is the forensic anthropology of the avatar. The university's database contains tens of thousands of case studies showing how people use virtual land and digital wearables to park cash outside the reach of traditional family courts. By the time Emily is halfway through the semester, she has uncovered a hidden portfolio that increases the total marital estate by 30%. This sharing of knowledge is not just about finding money. It is about the anthropology of honesty in the digital era. The university's forums are filled with students like Emily sharing tips on how to spot a hidden digital life. They discuss the historical trends of how assets are concealed, moving from offshore bank accounts in the 1980s to shell corporations in the 2000s, and finally to decentralized finance protocols in 2026. This is a collective intelligence that stays one step ahead of the people trying to hide the truth. One of the most intense parts of this module is the behavioral discrepancy algorithm. The university provides a tool that analyzes the Amazon and grocery delivery history of the household. It looks for anomalies. For example, if Jason is claiming he is living a modest life, but the delivery data shows consistent orders of high-end steaks, premium wine, and luxury grooming products being sent to a secondary address or a P.O. box, the algorithm flags this as a lifestyle inflation marker. This data is then used to draft a request for production of documents that is so specific and so backed by data that it leaves Jason with very few options but to settle. The potential outcomes for students who master these forensic tools are a matter of historical record within the university's data vault. On average, students who complete the forensic audit see a 22% increase in discovered assets compared to those who rely solely on traditional legal discovery processes. This is because traditional lawyers often lack the technical fluency to navigate the 2026 digital landscape at this level of granularity. They are looking for paper. The university is looking for bits and bytes. But there is an even deeper anthropological shift happening here. The university is teaching its students to view their marriages as data sets. This is the quantified divorce. By stripping away the emotional narrative and focusing on the forensic reality, the university helps students move past the betrayal and into the transaction. Emily is no longer a woman whose husband lied to her. She is a forensic investigator closing a case. This shift in identity is a survival mechanism. It allows the student to maintain their sanity in the face of overwhelming complexity. Imagine if you were Jason, sitting in your Chicago high-rise, thinking you were safe behind your encryption and your cold storage wallets. Then you receive a settlement proposal that lists every single wallet address you own, every piece of virtual land you bought, and the exact energy consumption of your secret mining rig. The psychological impact of this level of transparency is profound. It forces a level of honesty that was previously impossible in the American legal system. The Divorce University is essentially creating a world where secrets are no longer a viable currency. This is the anthropology of radical transparency. As more people enroll in these online institutions, the cost of lying in a divorce is becoming higher than the cost of telling the truth. We are seeing a historical trend where the complexity of the digital world is being used to simplify the legal world. But as we master the hunt for hidden money, a new and perhaps more dangerous form of secrecy is emerging. It is not about where the money is, but who is influencing the mind. In the next part, we are going to explore the shadow side of the university's community. The rise of the divorce influencers and the underground marketplaces where students trade weaponized psychological profiles of judges and opposing counsel. The hunt for assets was just the beginning. Now we are entering the hunt for influence and the secret social engineering that is deciding the biggest cases in America. How deep does the rabbit hole go when the students start gaming the system itself? The hunt for influence is the natural evolution of the information age. By 2026, the Divorce University has transcended the mere teaching of law and finance to enter the realm of social engineering and psychological leverage. To understand this, we have to look at the rise of the divorce influencer. This is a new anthropological category in the United States. Individuals who have successfully navigated the digital university system and now curate their own microcurriculums of influence. These are not lawyers. They are former students who have mastered the art of gaming the system and are now sharing that meta-knowledge with the next wave of enrollees. Imagine a character named Tyler, a commercial real estate developer in Los Angeles. Tyler is navigating a high-stakes divorce in 2026. He is a top-tier subscriber to a leading online divorce university, but he has moved beyond the standard modules. Tyler is now part of an invitation-only group within the platform known as the Influence Lab. Here, the knowledge sharing is focused on the anthropology of the courtroom, specifically the humans who inhabit it. The first tool Tyler uses is the Juridical Sentiment Analysis Dashboard. This is the application of big data to individual human personalities. The university has compiled every public transcript, every social media post, and every historical ruling from every judge in the Los Angeles County Superior Court system. But it goes deeper. Through crowdsourced data from thousands of other students, the platform has built a behavioral profile of Tyler's assigned judge, Judge Sarah Vance. Step by step, the university guides Tyler through a process called the bench dossier. Step 1 is the mood correlation audit. The data suggests that Judge Vance has a historical trend of being 15% more likely to grant a discovery motion if it is heard on a Tuesday morning rather than a Friday afternoon. This isn't a legal theory. It is a statistical reality derived from 10 years of court data. Step 2 is the linguistic matching protocol. The university's AI identifies that Judge Vance frequently uses specific architectural metaphors in her written opinions. Tyler is instructed to use those same metaphors in his declarations. From an anthropological perspective, this is the mirroring of the tribal leader's language to establish subconscious rapport. The third step is the personal bias filter. The lab has identified that Judge Vance has a personal history as a distance runner and often cites the values of endurance and discipline in her custody rulings. Tyler is taught to frame his parental contributions through the lens of long-term consistency and endurance, rather than short-term bursts of involvement. This is the anthropology of the hero's journey, custom-built for the specific audience of one, the judge. But the social engineering doesn't stop with the judge. The Divorce University has developed a module called Opposing Counsel Deconstruction. This is where the sharing of knowledge becomes truly weaponized. Imagine if you could know the exact settlement threshold of your spouse's attorney before you ever walked into mediation. The university achieves this by aggregating the settlement data of every case handled by that specific attorney. Tyler's spouse has hired a high-profile attorney named Mark Reynolds. The university's database reveals a historical trend. Mark Reynolds typically bills 40% of the total case value in the first 3 months, and is 70% more likely to settle once the case moves into the forensic accounting phase. Why? Because Reynolds is a generalist who dislikes the minutiae of digital asset discovery. Armed with this knowledge, Tyler is taught to over-provide digital data, burying Reynolds in a mountain of technical complexity that the university's AI has already organized and analyzed for Tyler. This is the use of asymmetrical information as a tool of exhaustion. This sharing of meta-knowledge has created a shadow marketplace within the university. Students are no longer just sharing legal tips. They are trading influence tokens. In 2026, we see the emergence of the underground referral network. Students who have cracked the code on a particular judge or a particular mediator sell their insights or even their specific scripts to other students. This is the anthropology of the secret society. The knowledge is no longer public. It is a proprietary asset that can be bought, sold, and traded within the digital walls of the university. Consider the potential outcomes of this systemic gaming. As more and more litigants use these tools, the legal system is experiencing a crisis of authenticity. Judges are starting to feel that the people in front of them are not real, but are instead highly optimized avatars of themselves. The historical trends of human interaction in the courtroom are being disrupted by the presence of a silent, digital advisor that is scripting every move. This is the move from the courtroom as a site of moral judgment to a site of algorithmic competition. The university's Influence Lab also teaches a technique called peer-to-peer pressure synthesis. This is the anthropology of the social circle. In 2026, your social reputation is a data point. The university provides a tool that maps the social and professional networks of the opposing spouse. It identifies influence nodes, mutual friends, business partners, or family members whose opinions the spouse values. The student is then given a curriculum on how to subtly manage the flow of information to these nodes. This isn't about defamation. It is about narrative control. It is about ensuring that the village hears a version of the story that supports a peaceful settlement, using the specific psychological triggers that the university's AI has identified as effective for those individuals. Step by step, the student learns to build a social wall around the conflict, making it socially and professionally expensive for the other spouse to continue the fight. This is the digital equivalent of the old world shunning or social pressure, but executed with the precision of a surgical strike. Anthropologically, we are seeing the return of the communal court, but instead of the elders gathering in the town square, they are being influenced through a coordinated digital narrative. The data from the United States in 2026 shows that cases managed through the Influence Lab have a 30% faster resolution rate than standard litigated cases. But the cost is the total erosion of trust between the parties. When every move is calculated, when every word is a mirror, and when the social environment is being engineered, the possibility of a genuine human reconciliation becomes almost zero. We are creating a society of perfectly managed, perfectly settled, and perfectly alienated individuals. Imagine if this level of social engineering were used not just in divorce but in every interaction. The Divorce University is the laboratory for the future of all American social life. But as we master the art of influencing others, we have to look at how the system is influencing us. The university is not a neutral tool. It has its own agenda and its own way of viewing the world. As we move into Part 7, we are going to look at the massive shift in the U.S. economy triggered by these institutions. The Divorce University isn't just a classroom. It is the center of a multi-billion-dollar economy that is cannibalizing the traditional legal and financial industries. We are going to look at the divorce GDP, how the money saved on lawyers is being spent on specialized digital assets, AI-managed trusts, and the new industry of separation tech. The hunt for influence was about power. Now we are going to talk about the massive shift in the American wealth map. What happens to the U.S. economy when the family unit is no longer the primary building block of wealth, but the individual student of the Divorce University? The financial landscape of America is being redrawn, and you are about to see the new map. The financial map of the United States in 2026 is no longer defined by the traditional nuclear household, but by the rise of the autonomous economic unit. For nearly a century, the American economy was built on the assumption that two adults sharing a mortgage, a car payment, and a tax return were the most stable and productive drivers of GDP. However, as the Divorce University has moved from a niche educational tool to a mainstream institutional force, we are seeing the literal deconstruction of this model. We are witnessing the birth of the divorce GDP. This is a massive shift where billions of dollars that were once locked in shared domestic equity or funneled into the coffers of legacy law firms are being redirected into a new, hyper-efficient sector of the economy known as separation tech, or SepTech. To understand the scale of this redistribution, we have to look at the historical trends. In the early 2020s, the average litigated divorce in a major U.S. metropolitan area could easily cost a couple between $40,000 and $100,000 in combined legal fees, expert witness costs, and court expenses. By 2026, the data indicates that students of online divorce universities are reducing these transactional losses by as much as 80%. This saved capital does not simply vanish. It is being reinvested into a new suite of financial products designed specifically for the post-household individual. Imagine a case study involving a character named Robert, a 50-year-old aerospace engineer living in Seattle. In a traditional 20th century divorce, Robert would have likely seen his retirement accounts liquidated or heavily penalized, his home sold in a forced market move, and a significant portion of his future earnings diverted into alimony structures that were often inefficient and high conflict. But in 2026, Robert is a graduate of the university's Wealth Autonomy Masterclass. Step 1 for Robert was the implementation of an AI-managed split interest trust. Through the university, he learned how to move marital assets into a temporary, algorithmically governed holding structure that allows for the growth of capital while the settlement is being finalized. Unlike a traditional trust managed by a human executor charging a percentage fee, this digital trust uses smart contracts to automatically distribute dividends based on the agreed-upon mediation milestones. The potential outcome here is a preservation of wealth that historical data suggests was nearly impossible under the old system of adversarial litigation. The second step in Robert's financial migration was the transition to individualized consumerism. The Divorce University doesn't just teach you how to split a bank account, it teaches you how to renegotiate your entire relationship with the American market. Robert is now part of what anthropologists call the solo economy. This is a market segment in 2026 that has surpassed the family market in total spending power. From micro-apartments designed with high-end modular offices to subscription-based domestic services that replace the unpaid labor of a spouse, the economy is retooling itself to serve the graduate of the Divorce University. Let's look at the data on SepTech. In 2026, the valuation of companies providing algorithmic co-parenting apps, automated asset valuation software, and digital identity protection services has reached an estimated $50 billion in the U.S. alone. This is not just a subsector. It is a new pillar of the American financial landscape. These companies act as the infrastructure for the Divorce University. For example, a student like Robert doesn't just learn about tax implications. He uses a university-integrated SepTech tool that performs a real-time analysis of his tax liability across multiple states, identifying historical trends in IRS audits for single filers with high net worth backgrounds. Step by step, the university guides the student through the creation of a new life pro forma. This is a 5-year financial projection that treats the individual as a startup. The student is taught to view their post-divorce life not as a recovery, but as a pivot. They analyze case studies of economic resilience, where individuals use their settlement capital to launch new ventures or retrain for the 2026 labor market. This is the anthropology of the second act. The university provides the templates, the data, and the peer group feedback to ensure that the individual doesn't just survive the split, but optimizes their new economic status. One of the most profound shifts we are seeing is in the real estate market. In 2026, the Divorce University effect has led to a surge in demand for what developers are calling flexible kinship housing. These are developments designed for co-parents who want to live in close proximity, but in separate, autonomous units. The university's urban planning modules teach students how to leverage their shared equity to purchase into these developments, which often feature shared childcare facilities and community-governed legal libraries. This is the respatialization of the American family. The household is no longer a single building. It is a network of units connected by digital agreements and shared economic interests. But there is a shadow side to this new wealth map. As the individual becomes the primary unit of the economy, the traditional safety nets of the family are dissolving. In 2026, we are seeing the rise of conflict insurance. This is a new financial product where individuals pay monthly premiums to cover the costs of potential future, legal or educational interventions, should their co-parenting agreement fail or their settlement require a re-audit. This is the commodification of domestic peace. Historical trends show that as trust in human institutions declines, the demand for insurance-based certainty increases. The Divorce University acts as the broker for these new products. Within the university's private marketplace, students can compare the potential outcomes of different insurance tiers or investment strategies. This creates a powerful feedback loop. The university collects the data on which financial products lead to the best long-term stability for its graduates, and then refines its curriculum to favor those products. This is the move from learning about money to being integrated into a financial ecosystem. Imagine if every major life transition was managed this way. The Divorce University is proving that when you share knowledge at scale, you can move an entire population from a state of financial chaos to a state of data-driven precision. The U.S. economy is becoming more resilient as a result. Instead of thousands of households collapsing into bankruptcy or long-term debt due to high-conflict divorces, we are seeing a population of highly educated, financially literate individuals who are capable of pivoting their capital and their lives with minimal friction. However, we must ask, what is the cost of this efficiency? When we treat the end of a marriage as a business pivot and the household as a liquidated asset, what happens to the social fabric that cannot be quantified? As we move into the deeper layers of this masterclass, we have to confront the most sensitive and controversial part of the Divorce University curriculum. It is not about the money, and it is not about the law. It is about the children. How is the 2026 Divorce University shaping the next generation of Americans? What does it mean for a child to grow up in a world where their parents' relationship is managed by an AI trust and a modular housing agreement? And why are some psychologists warning that the perfectly educated divorce might be creating a new kind of attachment crisis that the algorithms cannot predict? In the next part, we are going to look at the pedagogy of the child, the modules designed to teach children how to navigate their parents' university-mandated life. The classroom is moving into the nursery, and the results are unlike anything we have seen in human history. The classroom is moving into the nursery, and the results are unlike anything we have seen in human history. To understand this transition, we must look at the pedagogy of the child within the 2026 Divorce University framework. In the United States, we have historically treated children as passive bystanders in the legal dissolution of a marriage. They were the objects of custody battles, not the subjects of the educational process. But the anthropology of the digital era has shifted this dynamic. The Divorce University has introduced a dedicated curriculum for the youngest members of the household, fundamentally changing how a child's world is constructed. This is the era of the informed child, where knowledge of the system is shared directly with the offspring to mitigate the uncertainty of the transition. Imagine a case study involving a 10-year-old named Liam living in Denver. Liam's parents are currently navigating the advanced mediation module of an online university. In a 2010 scenario, Liam would likely be hearing muffled arguments through a bedroom door or receiving vague, emotionally charged explanations about why dad is moving into an apartment. In 2026, Liam has his own login to the University Junior portal. This is a gamified, age-appropriate educational environment designed to teach him the mechanics of his new reality. Step 1 for Liam is the Geography of Home module. This isn't just about maps. It is a lesson in the anthropology of space. Liam is taught that a home is not a single physical structure, but a set of routines and emotional connections that can exist in two different locations simultaneously. The university uses interactive storytelling and AI-driven avatars to explain complex legal concepts like joint physical custody. Through these case studies, Liam learns that his schedule is not a punishment or a result of conflict, but a data-driven plan designed for his stability. Step by step, the portal guides Liam through the creation of his own digital transition kit. He learns how to sync his school calendar, his extracurricular schedule, and even his favorite video game save files between his two households. The potential outcomes of this approach are visible in the historical trends of 2025. Children who were given this level of systemic literacy showed a 40% reduction in separation-related anxiety compared to children who were kept in the dark. However, we must examine the deeper anthropological implications of teaching a child to view their family through a structural lens. By sharing this knowledge, we are essentially inviting the child into the administrative layer of their own life. Liam is being taught the neutral narrative. If his mother speaks poorly of his father, Liam has been educated to recognize this as a linguistic breach. The university provides him with scripts, not to be a therapist to his parents, but to protect his own boundaries. He is taught to say, "Mom, the university says that is a grown-up topic and I would like to focus on my homework." This is the empowerment of the child through procedural fluency. From an anthropological perspective, this represents a massive shift in the parent-child hierarchy. In the traditional village, the elders held the knowledge, and the children followed the path laid out for them. In the 2026 Divorce University model, the child is given the same dataset as the parents. This creates a level of transparency that was previously unimaginable. Imagine if Liam's father tries to claim he cannot attend a soccer game due to work, but Liam, who has access to the shared family integrity dashboard, can see that the AI-managed schedule has already flagged that time as open. This is the end of the white lie in the American household. Knowledge is the ultimate accountability tool. Let's look at the data on the peer-to-peer child network. The university doesn't just educate the individual child. It connects them to a national tribe of their peers. Liam is part of a digital support group of other children in Denver, whose parents are also enrolled in the university. They share knowledge on how to manage 2 bedrooms, how to keep track of chargers, and how to handle the emotional fatigue of the transition. Anthropologists call this horizontal socialization. The children are creating their own culture, independent of their parents' conflict. They are sharing survival data that is more relevant to their daily lives than anything an adult could provide. But we must also address the potential outcomes regarding emotional development. Critics of this highly structured, data-driven childhood argue that we are creating a generation of mini litigants. If every interaction is managed by an app and every conflict is resolved by a script, what happens to the messy, essential human experience of navigating disagreement? There is a concern that by over-educating children in the mechanics of divorce, we are stripping away the innocence of the familial bond. We are teaching them that love is a contract that can be modularized and optimized. This is the attachment crisis that some researchers are beginning to observe in 2026. Children like Liam are becoming experts at the transaction of family life, but they may be losing the capacity for the deep, irrational loyalty that once defined the nuclear unit. Step by step, the divorce university is replacing the emotional intuition of the parent with the pedagogical precision of the algorithm. One controversial module, the parental evaluation tool for kids, allows children to provide feedback on how well their parents are adhering to the university-mandated co-parenting guidelines. This data is then fed back into the parent's dashboard, affecting their civility score. Imagine if your 10-year-old could technically influence your legal standing, or your insurance premiums, by reporting that you were 10 minutes late for pickup 3 times in a month. This is the ultimate subversion of the traditional American family structure. The historical trend is clear. We are moving toward a world where children are treated as autonomous stakeholders in the family business. The sharing of knowledge has moved from a top-down model to a decentralized, transparent network. For the American public in 2026, this is seen as a necessary evolution to protect children from the fallout of a 50% divorce rate. If the adults cannot maintain the stability of the household, the system will educate the children to maintain the stability of themselves. But as the children become more educated, they also become more critical. We are seeing a rise in teenage graduates of these junior portals who are now using their systemic knowledge to advocate for legislative changes in family law. They are testifying in state houses across the United States, armed with data from their own digital upbringing. They are not just products of the system, they are starting to become its architects. They are asking why the law still treats them as property when they have spent their entire lives being educated as participants. This brings us to the final frontier of the divorce university. As the classroom moves from the nursery to the legislative chamber, we have to look at the global impact. The United States is the primary laboratory for this model, but the anthropology of digital divorce is spreading. What happens when this American model of knowledge sharing meets cultures with completely different views on kinship and authority? And as we enter Part 9, we must confront the ultimate question. What is the end state of this educational revolution? Are we heading toward a world where marriage itself is preceded by a mandatory university course to ensure its dissolution is as efficient as its creation? The concept of the pre-marriage university is no longer a theory. It is the next module being loaded into the server. The future of the American contract is about to change forever. The future of the American contract is about to change forever because we are now entering the era of the pre-marriage university. Anthropologically, the United States has reached a tipping point where the reactive sharing of knowledge, learning how to dismantle a life only after it has broken, is being viewed as a systemic failure. In 2026, the leading online divorce universities are pivoting to a proactive model. They are marketing a new concept. If the data from thousands of failed marriages shows consistent, predictable patterns of collapse, then those patterns can be taught as a primary curriculum before the first vow is even exchanged. This is the movement from the divorce university to the relationship life cycle institution. We are witnessing the birth of marital onboarding, a process that treats a union not as a romantic mystery, but as a high-stakes partnership that requires a prerequisite degree in systems management. Imagine a case study involving a young couple in New York City named Jordan and Taylor. It is early 2026, and they have just announced their engagement. In a 20th century context, their preparation would consist of a few meetings with a religious leader, or perhaps a weekend retreat focused on communication. In 2026, Jordan and Taylor enroll in the University of Premarital Infrastructure. This is a 12-week intensive digital course that they must complete before they can even qualify for the highest-tier conflict insurance or favorable mortgage rates on their first shared home. The anthropology of this shift is profound. We are moving from a society that values the leap of faith to a society that values informed entry. Step by step, the university guides Jordan and Taylor through the architectural audit. Step 1 is the Financial Radical Transparency module. This is far beyond sharing bank balances. The university's AI analyzes their individual spending behaviors, debt-to-income ratios, and historical trends in their financial decision-making over the last 5 years. It identifies what the algorithm calls the financial friction coefficient. For Jordan and Taylor, the data suggests that in 3 years, their differing views on discretionary luxury spending will be a top 3 source of domestic conflict. The university doesn't just flag this. It requires them to draft a preemptive settlement for that specific hypothetical conflict. They are sharing the knowledge of their eventual arguments before they ever happen. The second step is the kinship and labor distribution syllabus. Jordan and Taylor are tasked with building a 5-year operational manual for their household. They must decide with data-backed precision how household labor will be valued, who will manage the emotional labor of social scheduling, and what the liquidation value of their shared time will be. This is the commodification of the honeymoon phase. By forcing the couple to view their relationship as a set of modular tasks and assets, the university is training them to be the administrators of their own romance. The potential outcome of this proactive education is a generation of couples who are divorce literate from day one. They are not afraid of the end of the marriage because they have already studied the anatomy of its potential failure and built the infrastructure to handle it. From an anthropological perspective, we must look at how this American model is being exported globally. As of 2026, the U.S. divorce university template is being analyzed by social scientists in countries like Japan and South Korea, where marriage rates have plummeted. These nations are looking at the American digital education model as a way to re-risk marriage. If young people believe that the exit costs, both emotional and financial, are managed by a transparent educational system, they are more likely to enter the contract in the first place. The sharing of knowledge has become a tool of demographic stabilization. The United States is no longer just exporting movies and technology, it is exporting the pedagogical framework for the modern human union. However, this rise of the pre-marriage and divorce university has triggered a massive institutional war in 2026. The American Bar Association and various state bar associations have filed a series of landmark lawsuits against these digital platforms. The legal establishment argues that these universities are practicing law without a license by providing predictive outcomes and automated settlement templates. But the universities argue that they are simply sharing historical trends and providing a curriculum for self-governance. This is the classic anthropological conflict between the gatekeeper and the democratizer. The legal industry represents the old world of guarded, expensive, and opaque knowledge. The divorce university represents the new world of open source, data-driven, and accessible survival data. Let's look at a step-by-step breakdown of how the university fights back against these legal challenges. First, they utilize the transparency offensive. They release anonymized data from 100,000 cases showing that university-led settlements result in 60% less long-term litigation than attorney-led divorces. Second, they leverage the student lobby. In 2026, millions of Americans who have successfully navigated their separations using these digital tools have formed a powerful political voting bloc. They are demanding that educational autonomy be recognized as a fundamental right in domestic matters. This is the transition from the litigant to the constituent. Imagine if this legal battle reaches the U.S. Supreme Court. The question at hand would be, does a citizen have the right to educate themselves out of a legal crisis using an algorithmic curriculum, or must they be forced to use a human intermediary? The historical trends of the digital age suggest that whenever knowledge is made accessible and efficient, the gatekeepers eventually lose their grip. We are seeing the deprofessionalization of trauma. The divorce university has taught Americans that they don't need a high priest of the law to navigate their most personal transitions. They just need a better syllabus. But as the university expands its reach, we have to look at the curriculum bias. Who is writing the lessons? In 2026, most of these platforms are owned by a handful of massive tech conglomerates. These companies have a vested interest in a society of high-velocity, low-friction individuals who are unencumbered by traditional, long-term domestic ties. Is the divorce university teaching people how to save their marriages, or is it teaching them how to efficiently liquidate them to better serve the digital economy? The anthropology of the curriculum reveals a distinct bias toward autonomy and mobility over stability and sacrifice. Step by step, we are being educated into a new form of human social organization. It is a world where the university is the lifelong companion, guiding us through the entry, management, and dissolution of every significant relationship. Jordan and Taylor, our couple in New York, are the first graduates of this new social order. They are confident, they are informed, and they are perfectly prepared for a divorce that hasn't even happened yet. This is the ultimate triumph of the sharing of knowledge, the total elimination of surprise from the human experience. But what happens when the educational model becomes the only model? What happens to the people who fail the course? As we approach the final part of this deep dive, we have to look at the post-educational society. We are going to explore the emergence of the unenrollable class, those whose data is so volatile and whose conflicts are so complex that even the AI-driven divorce university refuses to admit them. And finally, we will reveal the final module of the 2026 curriculum, the one that every student is warned about, but every graduate must eventually face. The most profound shift in the American family is not the divorce itself, but what comes after the degree is granted. The era of the post-family individual is here, and the data suggests it is the most productive, yet most isolated version of humanity we have ever created. How does the story end when the classroom is empty and the university has won? The final revelation of the divorce university is about to be unmasked. The final revelation of the divorce university is about to be unmasked, and it is not found in a legal loophole or a financial strategy. The ultimate discovery of this digital institution in 2026 is that the university itself has become the new primary social unit of the United States. We have moved through the forensic audits, the psychological reprogramming, and the predictive litigation models only to arrive at the final module, the autonomous sovereign. This is the stage where the student is finally certified as a post-family individual. From an anthropological perspective, the university is no longer just a school you attend to fix a problem. It is the infrastructure for a new way of being human. It is the end of the traditional social contract and the beginning of the transactional life. To understand the weight of this, we must first look at the case study of the unenrollable. Imagine a citizen named Caleb, living in the outskirts of St. Louis. Caleb represents a growing demographic in 2026, known as the red tagged. Caleb's digital footprint is volatile. He has a history of gig economy instability, inconsistent social media sentiment, and a lack of the structured financial data required for the university's AI to build a predictive model. When Caleb attempts to enroll in a top-tier divorce university to manage his separation, the algorithm returns a denial of service. This is the first step in the creation of a two-tier American justice system. The potential outcomes for someone like Caleb are stark. Because he cannot access the streamlined educational path to a settlement, he is forced back into the legacy court system, a system that in 2026 has become even more backlogged and expensive because it now only handles the high-friction, low-data cases that the digital universities reject. Historical trends show that this creates a new form of digital redlining. If you are too messy for the algorithm, you are too expensive for the law. Caleb's journey through the legacy system is a step-by-step descent into debt and unresolved conflict. While the university graduates in his same zip code are completing their separations in a matter of weeks for a fraction of the cost. Now let us look at the opposite end of the spectrum, the successful graduate. Return to Robert, our aerospace engineer from Seattle. It is late 2026, and Robert has just completed the final module. The legacy of the individual. Robert has achieved what the university calls procedural perfection. His assets are protected by smart contract trusts, his co-parenting is managed by a high-frequency AI arbiter, and his emotional state is regulated by the linguistic filters he learned in the behavioral synchrony program. Robert is the ultimate product of the divorce university. He is efficient, he is wealthy, and he is entirely autonomous. However, the anthropological data on graduates like Robert reveals a phenomenon known as social atomization. By sharing the knowledge of how to dismantle a marriage so effectively, the university has also dismantled the need for deep, interdependent human connection. Robert's village is now a series of service-level agreements. His relationship with his children is governed by a dashboard. His relationship with his former spouse is a data feed. The potential outcome of this high-level education is a society of perfectly functioning individuals who have lost the capacity for communal ritual. The university has replaced the messy, irrational loyalty of the family with the cold, rational efficiency of the degree. Step by step, the final module teaches Robert how to exist in this new state. It is a curriculum in AI-managed loneliness. It provides tools for the student to build a post-divorce life that is entirely self-contained. Robert learns how to use specialized septech apps to source companionship that is compatible with his pre-existing legal and financial constraints. He is taught to view all future relationships through the lens of risk mitigation. This is the anthropology of the cautious heart. The knowledge shared here is not about how to love again. but how to interact without ever again reaching the level of systemic vulnerability that leads to a divorce. The historical trends of 2026 suggest that this shift is permanent. The U.S. Census Bureau data indicates that for the first time in American history, more than 45% of households are occupied by single individuals, many of whom are graduates of these digital institutions. This is the divorce GDP in its final form, an economy built on the needs of the autonomous person. The university has won because it has created a recurring customer base. Once you have been educated in the way of the individual, you are unlikely to ever return to the traditional, unoptimized model of the family. But what does this mean for the sharing of knowledge itself? In the traditional village, knowledge was a bridge between generations. It was about how to hold things together. In the divorce university, knowledge is a tool for clean breakage. We have become experts in the forensic anthropology of our own failures. We can map the electricity usage of a secret mining rig. We can script our emotional responses to avoid a linguistic breach. And we can predict the sentiment of a judge in Travis County. We have mastered the mechanics of the ending, but in doing so, we have made the beginning feel like a dangerous investment. Imagine if you were to walk into a physical classroom of the divorce university in 2026. The room would be empty. The students are all in their modular homes, connected by a server, learning how to be alone together. This is the final revelation. The university is not a bridge to a better marriage. It is a bridge to a world where marriage is no longer the point. The sharing of knowledge has reached its logical conclusion. We have shared everything, our data, our trauma, our secrets, and our strategies, until there is nothing left but the system itself. As we conclude this deep dive masterclass, we must ask the final question that the university's curriculum avoids. If we have optimized every part of our social existence, if we have educated ourselves out of conflict and into autonomy, what is the purpose of the village? Are we building a more resilient America? Or are we simply building a more efficient one? The data from 2026 shows that while our legal costs are down and our financial literacy is up, our reported levels of deep social belonging are at an all-time low. We have graduated from the university, but we have been expelled from the community. The Anthropology of Sharing Knowledge via Divorce University Online in the USA is the story of how we traded our humans for our handsets. It is the story of how a society decided that the pain of a messy relationship was less acceptable than the sterile piece of a digital dashboard. As the final module closes and the certificate is issued, the student stands on the threshold of a new American landscape. It is a world of perfect settlements, optimized schedules, and sovereign individuals. It is a world where everyone knows exactly how to leave, and no one is quite sure how to stay. The next evolution of this system is already beginning. Even as the divorce university matures, a new shadow institution is emerging in the encrypted corners of the web. It is being called the Reconnection Underground. It is a group of university graduates who are attempting to do the one thing the algorithm says is impossible. They are trying to share knowledge on how to be vulnerable, unoptimized, and irrationally connected again. They are trying to find the village that the university replaced. The battle between the efficient individual and the messy human is entering its next phase. And the data is already starting to shift in ways that even the university cannot predict.